House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5 is aired, titled Regent. What happened in the episode? There was a lot of setup for what's going to become the season finale. We'll get into the major beats of that right now. While we're talking about House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5, do us a big favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment, smash the like button, and hit the notifications bell for future content. So welcome back, everybody. House of the Dragon Season 2. We just came off of Episode 4, which was the Red Dragon and the Gold, and we lost Rhaenys and Meleys at the Battle of Rook's Rest, and it was the best dragon fight that we've seen on Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. It was amazing, and knowing that we had such a pivotal episode with big battle and a major death, we knew and expected there was going to be a little bit of a reset as we deal with the after effects of the Battle of Rook's Rest. And that's what we got this week in Episode 5. So we're going to get into what we saw in the episode and what it means for the story going forward. And we started off on Driftmark. Poor Corlys Velaryon. I mean, this guy has been through the ringer since really the beginning of Season 1. And, you know, if you look at the events of what's gone on with the Dance of the Dragons, it's only been a few weeks since King Viserys has died. And so Corlys Velaryon is still getting over the injuries he sustained and the sickness and healing. And now he's lost Rhaenys. And we see a scene of Corlys, and he's in the throne room on Driftmark, and he's all alone. There's nobody in there. He's lost Rhaenys. And you get a sense that the weight of what all he's lost in his life has started to catch up with him. He's lost his children. He's lost his wife now. And he's looking for what's his path going to be, right? You see the tears streaming down his face, and Steve Toussaint, that plays Corlys Velaryon, has done a great job, and he's really good in this episode and the scenes he's given. But it sets the tone for the main part of the beginning of this episode, which is the grief over losing Rhaenys and what it does to the larger ambition of putting Rhaenyra on the throne and ending this conflict. So really powerful scene. And then we have a quick shot of Rhaenyra on Dragonstone. She's looking out over the bay, and you know she knows that this is pivotal, and what Rhaenys means for her cause. It's a major loss, and you see the concern on her face. We now return to King's Landing, and it's a different story. At least the expectation is it's going to be a different story, as everyone's favorite heel, Sir Criston Cole, the new Hand of the King, is returning back, expecting to be triumphant. They're carting into King's Landing amongst the small folk the head of Meleys. So you hear the announcement, behold, the traitor, the head of the traitor Meleys, the dragon. And they think that this is going to galvanize the small folk, I would assume, around Aegon and the Greens, but it has the opposite effect. For a lot of the small folk, they have seen the dragons as gods, and it is seen as a bad omen that the head of Meleys is being brought into the city, and the small folk are not really accepting of it. And Criston Cole starts to realize that they've miscalculated this scene. And you see the guy we've seen a few times to keep an eye on, Hugh, is in the crowd, and one of the individuals is saying to him about that they thought the dragons were gods, and Hugh says they're just meat. And so what is the effect, the long-term effect, going to be on the small folk, on the people that are impacted by this war, and now knowing that these dragons can die, they can be killed, and the soldiers are bringing this head in? You have to wonder if that's a dangerous, dangerous precedent that's been set, and ultimately a bad omen for the dragons as it relates to the small folk. And so we also see a cart being brought in that's covered, and we know that Aegon, the king, who's badly wounded, badly burned, is being brought in on this cart. And we don't know if he's going to survive or not, but we now know that someone's going to have to reign in his stead and be a protector of the realm. And who that's going to be, we don't know quite yet, but we know Aegon has been brought in, and we're going to learn about the extent of his injuries as he's brought in under the cover of the cart. Aegon is brought into the king's chambers, and they lay Aegon down, and they start peeling off the armor and the Valyrian steel from Aegon the Conqueror armor being peeled off his body. and you see the flesh being ripped off. You see a bone sticking out of his leg that has to be reset. He's got burns over half his face. Looks horrific. Alicent obviously is horrified by what she's seeing of her son. And you have Aemond in the room who's emotionless, no expression. He's just sitting there staring. And Alicent knows that they're at a pivotal moment in this war and that her son may not survive. And at the very least, someone's going to have to rule in his stead. So we then see Alicent going to see Sir Criston Cole, and he's cleaning his sword, the blood off his sword from the Battle of Rook's Rest. And she asks him point blank, what happened up there? And Cole doesn't bite. He doesn't tell her what happens. Does he truly know what happened? I think all Cole knows is that they've turned this battle over to the dragons, as he mentions to her later. And he seems changed. He seems very impacted by what he thought was going to be a battle and a victory for the soldiers in taking the castle and his plan with Aemond, but it didn't really turn out like that. And I think for the first time, Cole has seen that a battle of dragons is not a battle that he's prepared to really win or be a part of. You know, he's really struggling with what he saw at Rook's Rest. We then cut to Dragonstone, and obviously there's an impact on the loss of Rhaenys, and the small council is assembled in front of Rhaenyra, and we see Sir Alfred Broom again questioning Rhaenyra, but he's not the only one. Other members of the small council are uneasy about the path forward and their resolve around Rhaenyra as queen. She knows this, and she knows that she's in a bad spot, especially without Daemon, and now without Rhaenys. She needs help, and she knows it, and she also needs to take action. And so how Rhaenyra is going to navigate through the small council and the challenges put before her would start to come together throughout this episode as you start to see Rhaenyra put a plan of action together after she's lost Rhaenys and Meleys. We then cut to Jace and Baela on Dragonstone. A really good scene between these two. You almost forget that they're betrothed to each other. There's not a lot of physical chemistry. They haven't really shown that in the show, but there is chemistry between the two characters as far as their dialogue and their loyalty to each other. And Jace knows he needs to do something. He can't just sit around any longer. And so he's going to go to the Twins, which is run by House Frey, controlled by House Frey, because he needs that bridge for access for Cregan's army from the north to make passage. We've seen that bridge come into play before in Game of Thrones when Robb Stark needed access to it, and we saw how that turned out. But Jace, it needs to take action. He needs to solidify the Riverlands for his mother, and he's going to go do that. And Baela promises him that she won't say anything to Rhaenyra until after Jace is gone. And so it's a good scene between those two as they're starting to step up and take action to help Rhaenyra win the crown. We then cut to the Riverlands, and what is almost a humorous scene, we have Daemon Targaryen on Caraxes, and they're trying to bring the Brackens into the fold, but the Brackens won't bend the knee. They won't bow down to Daemon. They're not intimidated by Caraxes, and Daemon knows that he can't really afford to just burn them or have Caraxes feed on the Brackens, so he needs to be smarter than that. He needs the Brackens' toughness and grit. He sees the fight that they have. So he makes a decision to employ William Blackwood to use other tactics, taking the women and the children from the Brackens as a way to entice them to, or force them to fight in the war on the side of the Blacks. But he doesn't want the crown to be seen as doing this. So he tells them, the crown can't be seen, with his banners supporting this. So William Blackwood is thought to have been given an assignment to do this off the grid, so to speak. We'll see how that turns out. But that's Daemon's plan to bring the Brackens into the fold. We then cut to the Eyrie, the Vale, and we see Jane Eyre for the first time, and Rhaena Targaryen is there. If you remember, she's been sent there for protection for the children until some of those children can seek passage across the Narrow Sea. And while she's there, she's supposed to also provide a dragon for the Vale, because as impenetrable as that fortress is, their weakness is above the sky. And Jane Eyre knows that. So she's not really happy with the fact that the dragons that have hatched are small dragons, baby dragons. But as Rhaena tries to tell her, those dragons will one day grow up to be big and powerful. And so doesn't really seem like Jane Eyre accepted that, but you see the beginnings of this alliance with House Aaron, who's got 15,000 soldiers, by the way, so they're important as well. And so it's a good little scene. Not a very long scene between Jane Eyre and Rhaena, but a pivotal one in setting up the alliances that Rhaenyra needs to ultimately win this war. We then have a scene, again, another scene with Massaria and Rhaenyra. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of what they've done with Massaria this season. It seems a little disjointed to me. It's one of the things I haven't really enjoyed. But Massaria is speaking to Rhaenyra and giving her, I think what the showrunners are going for is someone who's connected to the small folk. And Massaria is that. And so she's telling Rhaenyra, look, there's more than one way to win a war. And so they're going to employ propaganda in the small folk at King's Landing who are hungry, starving, and the unrest is starting to begin in King's Landing. And so Massaria really plants that seed in Rhaenyra's head that you can use propaganda. Let's get somebody into King's Landing to start to plant those seeds. And so that scene serves as the beginning of that process moving forward as they send one of the handmaidens of Rhaenyra to King's Landing to begin to put the wheels in motion for that propaganda war. We then cut to Baela and Rhaenyra. It's one of the better scenes of the episode. Baela had several good scenes in this episode, but we have Baela and Rhaenyra talking about Rhaenys and how Baela misses her grandmother. And Rhaenyra tells her, did she ever tell you the story of how she bonded with Meleys? And of course, Baela has heard the story, but it's an interesting callback to why maybe Daemon Targaryen and Rhaenys never really got along all that well, because Meleys was the dragon that was ridden by Daemon's mother, who died when he was a toddler. And Daemon was taken as a baby to ride on Meleys with his mother right when he was born. And so I think it was assumed by Daemon when he was a little boy that he was going to bond with his mother's dragon, but Meleys would not have Daemon. But Meleys did take to Rhaenys. So there was a good little scene there, bonding between Baela and Rhaenyra, and also the linkage between Meleys and Daemon and his mother, who we're going to see a little bit farther in this episode. And it's probably the most controversial scene of the episode. Speaking of that scene that everybody's talking about, we have another vision, the haunting of Daemon. I kind of equate it to he's stuck in Luigi's mansion, but Daemon Targaryen is having another one of his visions. Is he being poisoned by Alice Rivers? Is he really being haunted by Harrenhal? Is Alice Rivers not the one that's poisoning him? We don't know all the answers to that yet, but we know it's another one of his dark visions. And in this scene, Daemon is fooling around with a young blonde woman that looks to be a Targaryen. At first glance, it looks like it may be Aemma, who was the wife of Viserys in season 1, who died in childbirth. But very quickly you realize, no, it's not her. It's another young woman. And Daemon is fooling around with her and laying on the bed and engaging in activity. And all of a sudden, there's a reference that she makes to the fact that she's Daemon's mother. And his face looks shocked and he's frozen. There's blood on his hands and blood on his mother, Alyssa Targaryen, who is married to his father, Baelor. And he comes to, he's at the dinner table. So one of the things that people have talked about is this in Daemon's mind that he fantasizes? No, Daemon never even knew what his mother looked like. He was a toddler when his mother died. And so he had no way of knowing. And actually, we don't know if that's actually how she looked or how it's just in his head, how he envisioned her, because it is thought that she had a broken nose, 2 different colored eyes, and was not a good looking woman by any stretch. She was more of a warrior and adventurer. And so we don't know if that's the case or if it is just the way Daemon envisioned his mother in his psyche, but it's subconscious. But whatever's going on, Harrenhal is haunting Daemon, and he's having to come to terms with all the bad things he's done and the worst parts of his personality, wanting power, wanting to be king. He's having to deal with all this within himself. So the fact that this castle is dilapidated and dark and haunted, it seems to be the same thing that's going on internally with Daemon. So there's some symbolism there that all this is happening in Harrenhal. So we'll get some answers, but it was certainly a graphic scene that a lot of people felt uneasy about watching. But I think it served as more of the haunting of Daemon Targaryen within his own soul. So Daemon then speaks to the people of Harrenhal about wanting to fortify the castle. They need to repair it so they can bring in a garrison. And so you see him start to put the plans together to bring in people and wood and tools to be able to do that. Daemon needs something to do. So I'm not a huge fan of some of the things they're doing with Daemon this season, but I do enjoy the magical aspects of Harrenhal and Daemon's journey within that. I've rather enjoyed that. I don't think we see enough of that in the lore of Game of Thrones. So I've enjoyed that part of it. I just hope that it comes to a resolution and the narrative fits within the larger story. And I think if that happens, I think we'll be okay with that. And as Daemon is starting the repairs on Harrenhal, he has a conversation again where he does not want to be referred to as the king consort. He wants to be referred to as king. And so you're seeing Daemon battle with the fact that he thinks he's the most fit to rule the seven kingdoms and to be the king. And how's that going to manifest itself with his allegiance to Rhaenyra? Is he going to expect her to be subservient to him and equal? Is he going to serve her? We don't know yet, but we know that he is battling within himself for what he thinks is his rightful place on the Iron Throne. At King's Landing, as we return to their small council, we have a vote on who's going to be the protector of the realm, and it does not go well for Alicent. She thinks that just like when Viserys was sick and ailing, that they're going to give the reins over to her. Doesn't happen. Aemond has now come of age. Aemond has Vhagar. Aemond has taken out Meleys and Rhaenys, and he's also taken out Luke, by the way, that started all this. And they all defer to Aemond. So now he is the protector of the realm. First thing he does, he cuts down all the rat catchers that's been hanging and rotting, and he also locks the gates of King's Landing, which doesn't make Hugh happy as he's trying to get his sick daughter and his wife out so that they can go to Tumbleton, but they don't make it out. The gates get locked. So what's going to happen to Hugh? We don't know quite yet, but he realizes that he's in dire straits as his daughter is very sick and potentially dying. As the gates are being closed, we also have a scene of Kristen Cole and Alicent after Aemond has been voted as the protector of the realm. And it's kind of a breakup scene. Kristen is talking to Alicent. She's frustrated. She sees him as a snake and that he turns into a moth after the nighttime. And she basically calls him weak. But what Kristen tells her is that we've given this war to the dragons. He is impacted by what he saw at Rick's Rest. And you're seeing that play out as he looks at Alicent and basically says that there was no other option. Aemond is the protector of the realm. And so there's nothing more between these two, at least at the moment. And it seems like that relationship is over, at least for now. And Alicent is even more isolated and put to the side. We then have a great scene of the twins. We see the bridge. We see House Frey. We see Vermax just outside the bridge. And we have Jace, who knows this is a pivotal moment. He needs to get access to that bridge so that the Army of the North can cross. He does a deal with House Frey against his better judgment. He says, they want Harrenhal after the war's over. What does Jace care? Harrenhal's a broken down place, and so he commits to that, and he solidifies the access to the bridge so that the Army of the North can come down to the Riverlands. It is pivotal, the moves that Jace is making to strengthen his mother's claim to be able to be on the throne and win this war. So you can't underestimate how important it is for him to get access to that bridge. And Jace did accomplish that in that scene with House Frey. So as I mentioned before, Daemon Targaryen is repairing Harrenhal. He's got an axe. It's an interesting scene with him and Alice Rivers. She doesn't seem too pleased that he's taking action and fixing the castle. She even makes mention that he's more suited for having the sword in his hand than an axe. But as they talk, she starts to tell him about how she's hearing things in the Riverlands about children, innocent women and children being tortured. And Daemon asks her, is that the news? And she says, news, there's no news. I hear it in the wind. Another callback or maybe foreshadowing that maybe Alice is not necessarily human or she's otherworldly. We do know that there's some strange visions and foreshadowing that she's had. And this is another one of those scenes where she talks about hearing things in the wind. And She also tells Damon, as she challenges him a little bit as he walks away, that it was too bad that he ever never knew his mother. So does that mean that she has poisoned him and she's putting these haunting dreams and visions and dreams into his head, and that she knew that Alyssa was in the dream or in the vision? Who knows? But the fact that she called out that he did not know his mother also lets you know that he never knew what she looked like, which is another reason why he didn't know who the woman was in the dream sequence. So very interesting that she mentioned that. You know, we'll see if all these things around Alice Rivers and Damon actually come into play as Damon weaves his way back into the story. And he's really been isolated for most of this season so far. How's Damon going to make his way back? Is he going to make his way back at all? We then cut back to Driftmark, and Bela is with her grandfather, Corlys Valerian, and they have a great conversation. I think it's the best scene of the episode, one of two pivotal scenes. And the scene of her saying that Rhaenyra needs him, and she gives him the box that has the pin for the hand of the queen. And so he looks at the box. He then says that he wants Bela to be the heir to Driftmark. And Bela turns to him and says, I'm of fire and blood. The heir to Driftmark needs to be of salt and sea. So that's some foreshadowing as well as to what Corlys Valerian ultimately is going to do with Driftmark and who is going to be the heir when Corlys dies. So is Corlys going to take this new challenge to be the hand of the queen? He needs some sort of motivation, and he's lost his wife. So is he going to seek vengeance? You can pretty much bet on it. So we then have Corlys on the throne of Driftmark, and he grips that hand of the queen pin. So we know that Corlys is now going to be in the game, involved. What is the Sea Snake going to do to advance Rhaenyra's cause? He's been sitting on the sidelines for almost a season now, and so we're finally going to see Corlys Valerian become the Sea Snake that we all want to see him be one more time, and do it in the name of Rhaenyra and Team Black. So it's going to be really fun to see an active Corlys Valerian going to war, and that's a pivotal scene. We also see Rhaenyra meeting with Sir Alfred Broom. She's worried about Daemon. She doesn't know where he stands. She is dispatching Sir Alfred Broom to Harrenhal to find out, Daemon, where do you stand? Are you with us? Are you against us? Are you serving yourself? She needs to know so that she can plan accordingly to win this war. And Daemon, his role in this is pivotal. So Alfred Broom is dispatched to find that out. At the same time, we see Daemon awoken late at night. The Brackens are at Harrenhal, and this whole strategy to take the women and children from the Brackens to put pressure on them to fight with Team Black in the war did not work. The Brackens saw him as an interloper, and they basically say, you know what, you can burn us with dragons, but we're not going to fight for you. And one of the mistakes that William Blackwood made that Daemon told him not to do was he flew the banners. He had the banners of the Targaryen sigil and the red and the black, and the Brackens would not accept that. That was a big mistake. Daemon's made several mistakes. He's really struggling. He's staring into the fire. At the same time, he has another vision of his dead wife, Lena, and she's asking him, are you protecting our girls? And so Daemon is, all this turmoil is coming to the forefront for Daemon. He's got to settle the battle within himself so that he can serve Rhaenyra and serve the greater cause. Is Daemon going to do that? We're getting closer to getting an answer on that. We then see Aegon back at King's Landing in the bed, and he's barely alive. Alicent has a warm moment where she's there with him. She puts her hand over his cheek. It's a similar scene to what she had with her husband Viserys when he was dying. And she's there, she puts the hand on his cheek, and then she gets up to walk out of the room, and you hear him barely whisper, "Mummy." So Aegon is alive. He can speak. We know that. How quickly will he recover, if ever at all? We don't know quite yet, but it's one of those scenes that, you know, we've seen several this season where you almost feel empathy for Aegon. Like, he didn't want this, but his mother drove him to get on that dragon and go to war. And so, you know, it's one of those moments where you feel for Aegon, and it's another moment where you wish Alicent maybe had heard that, but she didn't, and she leaves the room before hearing him reach out to his mother. We then see, as we wrap up the episode, Rhaenyra on Dragonstone in the library. She's again looking at the book of Visenya, who wrote on Vhagar in Aegon's conquest, and she was the first wielder of Dark Sister. And we've seen that twice now this season. Jace comes into the room and says, do you really want to have her be your example? He really didn't think that's a good idea. But what Rhaenyra is thinking about is being a warrior, taking action to win this war as a female leader and monarch and queen. And Jace is trying to temper that. And he tells her that they have the twins. And so she's happy about that because she knows how important that is. But she's concerned about Vhagar. She knows that no one dragon can match up with Vhagar. And she says, we have dragons, but they don't have dragon riders. Then Jace comes up with the second thing that he's done in this episode that is pivotal, either for the positive or negative. We don't know yet. But he said, look, there are so many Targaryens in our history that didn't sit the throne, and they sired bastards. So there are those that have the blood of the dragon that could be riders. And she starts to realize that he's onto something there, however dangerous it may be. And they're in the library. And so Jace says, we have records. We can find out who these people are. They mentioned even the Tarleys. Remember Samwell Tarly from Game of Thrones? But Jace is basically giving her an idea. We have Vermithor, who's almost as big as Vhagar. We have Silverwing. We have wild dragons. We have more dragons than the Greens. We need to employ them. We have to find dragon seeds. And so, at the end of the day, Rhaenyra looks at him, and you see the wheels turning, and she says, it's a mad thought. Then the episode closes. We're done with episode 5. What does it mean to have dragon seeds? These are most likely going to be people that are not necessarily highborn. They may be small folk, bastards. Where are their loyalties? And when you give someone a dragon, that is very dangerous. You may win the war, but you now have people who may think they're more powerful than you. So it's a dangerous precedent. Will it work for Rhaenyra and the Blacks? We don't know quite yet, but Jace made his mark this week with the access to the bridge at the Twins so that the Army of the North can get passage to the Riverlands. He also has come up with the possibility for dragon seeds to win the War of the Dragons. So Jace made his mark this week. She's now going to have a new Hand of the Queen in Corlys Velaryon, and we don't know what's going to happen with Aegon. So the wheels are in motion, leading us up to episodes 6, 7, and 8 as we wrap up this season. What are going to be all the effects of the things that we've seen with the small folk, the people that are impacted by this war, the dragons that haven't even been ridden yet? How's it all going to play out? I think this was a good setup episode for 6, 7, and 8. We'll be here to cover it. Let me know what you think. What were your favorite moments of the episode? Did you like the scenes with Jace and Bella? Did you like the scenes with Corlys Velaryon? What were your favorite moments? While you're doing that, make sure to smash the like button, leave us those comments, hit the notifications bell for future content, and most importantly, hit subscribe so we can continue to grow our channel.